Hello there, this is Beth with another YouTube pagan channel. Question number 39. What does shadow darkness mean to you? Comfort. It's the place where you go to hide and be safe, the dark. I'd argue for me that there's a strong sense of safety that I feel with shadow or darkness. Because you can't be seen. Don't ask me why. Well, actually, I do know why. It mostly deals with a bunch of stupid peer abuse in high school, or not being seen was pretty much impossible. Shadow darkness. I'm a mom. Safety. I think really in some ways the darkness feels really safe to me, in that in many ways I've always been more comfortable in the shadow than I have in the light, and have actually really had to work more on like seeing the light as not a negative thing. And in moving out of what's kind of this comfort zone of being able to hide in these little shadow spaces of self, and moving out to using my voice more and coming more into the light. So a lot of what shadow and darkness means for me is just that safety of having safe places to hide where people can't see you and they can't see inside of you and they can't do you harm. So in many ways that's what shadow and darkness is a safe place to go hide. And really some of the first goddesses I worked with have large shadow aspects, such as Persephone, having brain cramp, Persephone, Lilith, Kuan Yin not so much, but there was a third one I was thinking, and it just, Ereshkigal, all kind of the three major goddesses I worked with before like the freaking age of 25 were all pretty much underworld dark shadow chicas. I always felt a strong inclination to that kind of motif and that strength that comes out of those women standing their own in many ways. And so yeah, I don't think I have the negative connotation that a lot of people have of like darkness. It's so bad. You shouldn't go there. Ignore the dark. See, don't deal with your negative energies. Negative emotions are bad. Don't be angry. Get rid of that anger. And it's like, dude, anger can be creative fuel. And there are things to be angry about in this world. And I'm sorry, even if you want to light and love it, you can still be royally pissed off that, it's the 21st freaking century and we're still trying to get women paid the same rate as men in the US. That women are still being marginalized and held as chattel and wives. That's a good reason to be pissed off, I think. That if you're a black person in the US and you get pulled out by a cop, there's a good chance they'll just shoot you because, well, black people are scary. Which is just idiotic. If you're afraid of the people that you have to protect and serve that much, you should not be a cop. But, so those are very good things to be angry about, and put that anger into activism or some form of creativity that is fueled by that anger. There are many positive things you can do with anger. The point with anger, like when you start living like your life from that angry point, it ain't so pretty. I've been there. I didn't like that. I decided to change that and for the better. If you move from anger, that's a whole different story. That's like giving in. If all you can do is be angry at people and you live from that little anger point and all your choices revolve around that anger point, that's not so good. I'd say that's when you kind of fall into the darkness and shadow where you're gonna destruct yourself and not be able to see the creative aspect or even the safe and comforting aspect of shadow and darkness. you know, into, I think there's like the anger that can be turned inwards, and that also is not a healthy way to deal with anger and shadow and darkness. And I think, trying to squash those things down sometimes almost feeds them more than just being like, yeah, I got anger and I'm okay with that because it's part of me. And without that pissed offness about women's rights and all that kind of stuff, I wouldn't be me. I identified as a feminist when I was probably about 13 or 14. And it's kind of interesting because you hear like the whole bra burning thing. If you think about what those women had to wear, what their mothers wore, and what their grandmothers wore, they still knew people who had been wearing corsets as an adult. Some of those girls, dude, you'd be burning your underwear too. Spanx is like nothing compared to those girls from the 40s and 50s. Those things were hardcore. I'd burn my bra too if I had to put up with that shit. But there's things to be pissed in the world, and I think the shadow and darkness can inform those and bring a certain quality that the light can't to those aspects. Yeah, you definitely, I don't, and I think too, it's like, I believe I talked about in the light one of how it's, sunshine and shadows, and it's very much, for me, it wasn't so much bringing the darkness in, it was bringing the light in. And so, once again, it comes down to that balance of sunshine and shadow. The light can be that love that fuels you, and that's where you can move from in being heart-centered. And that anger, though, can be such a creative force if you let it fuel you in a creative manner. It's like fear. Fear, if you bring breath into it a lot of times, will change into excitement. You can morph that emotion of fear. And I'm talking about non-instinctual fear, afraid to put yourself out there, afraid to go to the yoga class because you're whatever, that kind of fear that is not particularly based in a solid reason, not the fear of, I got a bad feeling that this guy walking down the street, not good. I don't want him to pass me because there's no one else around and it's dark. Not that kind of gut fear that makes you go, you got to pay attention to that fear. I'm talking about those little fears, and that fear of not being enough, that kind of stuff that often is internalized in the stories we tell ourselves that aren't really that true anymore. That kind of fear-based, not instinctual, primal fear. We should always pay attention to that because there's usually something going on that you want to pay attention to. But really, when it comes down to darkness and shadow, it's really a comfort zone for me. And in the last few years, I've really just shoved myself out more into the light aspect to become more balanced and bring sunshine and shadows in. I'm not just all shadowy and working from that point of anger, working from a different point of love that can embrace that aspect of self. All right. You guys have a wonderful day, and thank you for watching. Bye-bye.